Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. Home is where the heart is a well-known idiomatic phrase conjuring wonderful memories and emotions. But home isn't always one specific brick-and-mortar structure, but a place where one can have an emotional bond or feeling of being content with the people you love. That is the true significance of home, somewhere where you're comfortable and happy. My guest believes that everyone deserves a beautiful home. Lynda Huffman left the corporate world after decades of working in the medical sales profession and decided to concentrate on what makes her happy, interior design. For over 30 years, she's been designing and decorating on the side, and now she's created the Let's Decorate app to help anyone and everyone have an easier time at what can be an overwhelming task. Here to talk with us about her relationship with her mother and who she is today is Lynda Huffman. Welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you so much for having me today.
And you are joining us from Shreveport, Louisiana, Louisiana is one of my favorite states. So welcome to my podcast.
Well, thank you so much. And we do love our food here for sure.
Oh, my. Your food, your music, your historical architecture. There's so much to Louisiana that if anyone listening has never been there, please go. Maybe not in the summer, but...
Definitely not in the summer,
right.
But
it's a beauty.
We do have a great culture here. So I do highly recommend to visit if you haven't been before.
So, Lynda, tell me, you are the daughter of?
I am the daughter of Bob English and Carolyn Taylor, and I am the only daughter, but I do have 4 siblings. I have 3 half-siblings and a step-sibling.
Wow, that's quite the brood, as they say.
It is, and it gets even more complicated after that. So,
you had sent me a note saying that you have a complicated mother history, and you mentioned abandonment issues and some verbal abuse, and I'm hoping that you can shed some light on the process, and I don't know when all this started, but you can tell us that as well, and how you've come to move out of it or beyond it, or embrace it and move on.
Absolutely. So it's very complicated in the sense that I had a mother and a stepmother, and my stepmother is technically who raised me because my mother was considered an unfit mother and lost custody of me when I was 2 years old. So it all started, she got pregnant when she was 17, I believe, and my dad was 19. They got married because she got pregnant, and right before I was born, my dad was shipped off to Vietnam, and which was very hard for a 17-year-old. And she was not ready to be a mother. And we ended up moving to Fayetteville, North Carolina, to be where my dad was. And that lasted for about 6 months, I believe. And then she came back to Louisiana with me. I'm not exactly certain of what the circumstances were at that time, but she lost custody and they put me in care of my grandmother, who is my world. And sometime within the next year, my mother kidnapped me out of the front yard at my grandmother's house and took me to New Orleans, where I don't know all the details. She was waitressing at a bar and she was working nights. She hired a 14-year-old babysitter to take care of me and left me with this 14-year-old babysitter with 103 fever. Turns out I had rubella. They took me to the hospital. And fortunately, at that time, if you had a missing child, as long as you didn't take them across state lines, the state had a missing child report. And so when this little girl and her parents brought me to the hospital, they immediately contacted my grandmother. They were unable to get in touch with my mother. They didn't even know where she was. And so at that point in time, Red Cross brought my dad back home from Vietnam in order to go to court, make sure that I was in good care with my grandmother. And then he went back to Vietnam. So they were divorced. He took care of the divorce. He took care of custody, and I lived with my grandmother for about, I think, 2 years. He eventually married my stepmother, and I believe they were I think I was 3, and she had a son from a previous marriage. Or not, I don't think he was a marriage. I'm sorry. From a previous relationship, we'll say that. And they were married for 40 years. She did not like me. She was very jealous of me. I think it was because I looked so much like my mother. She was overweight. My mother was not. I think she had some very large amounts of insecurity. She came from a very dysfunctional family and a very abusive childhood. So I know that's what she was dealing with then. I know that now. I didn't know that until I was in my 20s. But she was a constant source of really torment for me. All of my friends called me Cinderella. I was her slave around the house. I was constantly told that I was ugly. I was fat. And the clincher was that I was ugly and fat, and I was never going to have a man to take care of me. And that started from the time I was about 7 years old. She would lie to my dad about things that I had done that I really had not done in order to keep me in trouble so that I would be on restriction and not be able to leave the house. When I wasn't in trouble for something and I did spend the night with a friend, I had to be at home by 8 a.m. on that Saturday morning because my dad would leave to go to work and I had to be there to clean the house. I didn't get to socialize a whole lot just because she kept me under thumb. And she made sure that my dad was always mad at me about something. Now, that's not to say that Lynda didn't do a few things she shouldn't have and did get in trouble. But the majority of it was, 6 weeks on restriction for not folding the clothes was a little much. I do recall that I got caught sneaking out of the house one time, got in trouble for that. That was well deserved. I would kill one of my kids if they did that today. But for the most part, I was a good kid. I never did drugs. I was just a good kid. And I was a wallflower in high school, so much to the degree that when I went back for my 20-year reunion, 90% of the people had no clue who I was, couldn't remember me. And I was in band and I was a majorette my senior year, but I was very, very shy, very, very introverted. I had a couple of friends because they lived in the neighborhood. That was the only people I was allowed to hang out with. I had a couple of boyfriends, but those were very short-lived. Then I got ready to go to college. I graduated when I was 17 and my dad would not let me go. And I had lived my moment for being able to get out of that house. I would literally, from the time I was 7 years old, drive down the road and I would spot all these wooded areas or under a bridge, and that's where I was going to run away to. I wanted out of that house so bad I could not stand it. And I never did run away, but that thought was always there. So when it came time that I was going to get to go to college, I got a scholarship to a college that was about an hour and a half away. I was so excited. And my dad said, no, you're not going. You're too young. And of course, that was my stepmom was in his ear. She did not want me leaving that house. And so I got a job. I started saving my money. And as soon as I turned 18, I could not get out of that house fast enough. I got an apartment with two of my high school friends that were still in town. I started saving my money because I was going to college, whether they liked it or not. If I had to pay for it, which I ended up doing, I paid for it myself. Didn't get to go where I wanted to go, but at least I got to go. And I knew that I was never going to have to depend on them for anything, or a man for that matter. I was going to prove to her I did not need a man to take care of me.
All right, so hold on. Can you hold your next thought for a minute?
I'm trying to make it go fast.
Oh, don't worry about making it go fast. You're doing an amazing job reconstructing your life so succinctly for us. And you don't need a man. No one needs a man to be successful or to be able to take care of themselves. I just want a second to recap for a minute. So Carolyn was your biological mom.
Right.
Do you give your stepmother a name or don't want to?
No, I prefer not to. Just because I do have siblings that, they're half siblings with her, and I don't want to step on their toes because like I've said before, they have a different perspective of how all this went down. They did not have the same type of relationship with her that I did. She was, for them, they were her favorites, especially her son that came from the previous relationship. He could do no wrong. And we all have relationships now, very, very good relationships now.
Wow, do you really? With your stepmom?
Nope. My stepmom passed away about 12 years ago, and when she passed away, the whole dynamics in our family changed.
You have good relationships with the children?
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's great. Fantastic. That's a part of the healing process, I'd imagine. Okay, so let's go back to your biological mom, Carolyn. Did she ever materialize again? I know that your dad handled the divorce and everything, but did she come back into your life as a child?
She tried. My dad was very adamant about not letting her have too much access, which who can blame him? She would come and visit occasionally, like maybe once a year at Christmas, which is another source of contention with my stepmother, because I can see where her showing up at Christmas every year with all these wonderful gifts, but then she hadn't done anything throughout the rest of the year. She didn't pay child support or anything like that. Of course, my dad didn't ask her to. He wanted full rights, and he did not want her to have visitation or anything like that. So yes, on and off throughout, I was never allowed to spend time alone with her. The first time she and I ever got to go out to eat dinner or anything, I was 18.
What was that like?
I think I had because I didn't know all of this background until I was probably 15 or 16. And so she was my dream. My stepmother was so mean to me. I wanted my mom so bad. I wanted her to be like this dream that I had, the June Cleaver, and come to find out she wasn't. She had, during the many years that we were separated, she remarried and had 2 more children. And up until 2 years ago, we thought both of those children were the husbands that she married. Turns out she had gotten pregnant before she married him, didn't tell him that she was pregnant. And so my sister found out 2 or 3 years ago through Ancestry DNA that that was not her dad.
She just found out. As an adult.
As an adult, yes. And what makes it even sadder, well, I don't know if it makes it sadder, makes it complicated that her dad, that she grew up thinking her dad, passed away probably about 8 months before she found out all of this. So she never got to have any reconciliation with him and say thank you for raising her as his own. But we don't know 100% if he knew or he didn't, but we're assuming that he didn't, because just his personality, I think he would have said something. I think he would have brought it to the forefront for sure.
Wow. But he loved her.
Oh, he loved that child. If he knew, kudos to him. And she knows that too. She does know that.
Okay, so your biological mom is still with us?
Yes, she is.
Does all of this, your past, does it define you today? I don't know how it could not, because it's made me who I am, good, bad, or indifferent. I think that we make choices in life. I could have spent the rest of my life feeling that anger that my mom had let me be raised by this wicked stepmother. In my mind, I mean, when I grew up, that's what all my friends called her. But we make a decision, and we can either say, okay, I'm going to let this be the excuse for why I'm behaving the way I'm behaving. Or I can say, you know what, because I could have been the same type of stepmom to my stepchildren as she was to me. But I think because my stepmother was like that, I chose to take a different approach with my stepchildren. And we are very close. I am very close with my stepchildren, and they've been my stepchildren since they were 8. And I think this decision happened with the birth of my first child. My biological mom wanted to be there. But after learning the history, I had a lot of resentment for the fact that I felt like she abandoned me and left me for this woman to take care of me. And
So therefore, I was going to pay her back. You're not going to have this type of relationship with my children. It's not going to happen. I'm not leaving you alone with them. I don't trust you. I don't know what in my head I thought was going to happen. But I was not, I was going to make her pay for it. And that's basically how I kind of thought about it in my head. And my oldest daughter was born when I was 27, and my first husband and I lived in Denver, Colorado, and I can remember her wanting to come up and keep her and help me. And I was like, no, you didn't help me throughout my whole life. Why do you want to come help me now? I just was very resentful and very angry and very hurtful. And I felt like I wanted her to feel that too. Long story short, we moved back to Shreveport. I have a second child. And with the birth of that second child, something inside of me said, you know what, Lynda? You can either choose to spend the rest of your life in anger and hurt, or you can choose to forgive and take this down a whole nother path. You don't want your stepmother to be their grandmother, because you know how that's going to turn out. And, your mom may have grown. And to be perfectly honest, she has been an amazing grandmother to not only my kids, but my husband's kids, to my sister. She's just been, let's just say she's a much better grandmother than she was a mother.
Well,
she takes
hallelujah.
Yeah,
thank
for
God
sure.
she woke up.
And what must I have felt should I have decided not to let that happen? What would my kids have missed out on?
You'd create this next generation of the hate and resentment. They would never know
exactly
the love that you put into it and transformed your future. And you're Cinderella, for gosh sakes. What the heck? You got the glass slipper. You weren't going to let anyone stop you.
But it's and anyone who's been through a lifetime trauma type event like that knows that it's not an overnight thing. It does take time. It took so much time to build my self-confidence and know that, I'm not fat and I'm not ugly. And no, I don't need a man to take care of me. I'm an independent woman. I've raised 2 children as a single mom for 5 years when I went through divorce. And I think the first step that I saw myself grow was when I got divorced. I had to get a job, and I was sewing. I'm also a seamstress. I was sewing drapes and pillows and all of that on the side, but I was like, I've got to have health insurance. This is not going to cut it. And so I ran into a friend of mine at church, and he said, hey, we have a job opening in advertising sales. And I'm like, what? Like, go into somebody's office that I don't know and try to sell them something? That's not me. I would have never in a million years thought I could see myself making a cold call or even a sales call for that matter. He goes, just come talk to her. We'll train you. We'll do all that. He goes, I think you'd be great. And so I had to have a job. It was the only offer I had on the table at the time. And so I was like, okay. I went in, I interviewed, I got the job. And within 2 years, I was the #1 sales rep with that company. And that led me into my pharmaceutical sales. And you could just see the confidence in me grow. And I don't think I even saw it until a friend of mine from college she hadn't been back to Shreveport in a while. She goes, Lynda, you were just a different person. She goes, your confidence is it's just crazy. This is not the shy girl that I met in college. And I was like, you know what? You're right. You're right. I'm not that girl anymore. And I think it all came down to the point where I said, you know what? I am not going to let this anger and hurt keep me held back, because I don't feel like if you don't let go of anger and hurt, you're going to be stuck in that same mindset. It's going to hold you back from doing things that you never thought you could do. And I think if I had not released that, I don't know who I would be. I can guarantee you I wouldn't have been in sales.
Well, you wouldn't be filled with this joy and this love. I believe that you would have been in a darker place. I mean, I'm not a professional therapist, but there is so much to be said for being able to let go of that hurt. And it's not easy. the hurt, the anger, the resentment, the constant voice in the back of your head saying you're no good, you're this, you're that. And it is possible to turn your life around.
It is. And I guess if I was going to give any advice to someone, it would be just take it one step at a time, because it's not an overnight process. But that first step, oh my goodness, it feels so good. And back in October of 2019, I was the COO of a medical diagnostic company, and we have, I say the company had locations all over North Louisiana, Texas, San Antonio, El Paso, and I was having to travel a lot, and I was kind of feeling like the boss that I had at the time was slipping into some of those bad habits of not being a positive leader. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to find myself in this situation again. And I made the decision I've had the idea for this app in the back of my head for many years. I said, it's time. It's time for me to do it. And I just walked in and here's my notice. And I'm not sure if my husband was as happy about that decision as I was.
But you know what? Sometimes you just have to put your foot down. Your morals, your principles, your heart said, I'm not going down this road where I'm in an unhappy situation. I'm not letting anybody else do that to me.
And my passion has always been, since I was 7 years old, I found my joy and my happiness. I can't even tell you how many times or ways that I rearranged my room and redecorated my room. That I knew from the time I was 7 years old that I wanted to be an entire interior designer. And I feel like it's my calling. I really do.
Can you share with my listeners what your home was like when you were a little girl living with your stepmom?
We lived in a very middle-class neighborhood. I would say maybe lower to middle class. There was always plenty of food on the table. We didn't really want for much. And the house was nice. My grandmother, who I feel like I get my interior design eye from, kind of helped my stepmom create the house and bought the furniture and helped her buy art and things like that. And not that anything was expensive, but it was nice. And I was constantly rearranging all of the knickknacks, and I had to dust all the time. So every time I had to dust, I would rearrange all the shelves. But it was never I do not have fond memories when I walk in that house. And my dad still lives in that house. It's very dark. It doesn't bring me good memories at all. And so when I started doing this, I realized, the interior design is basically a luxury service, and not everybody can afford that. But that doesn't mean that people don't need help with it. And I wanted to devise a way to help everyone have a beautiful house, because I think everybody deserves that. You live in your house, and the way you feel in your house determines how you feel when you walk out of your house. And when you're at work and you're coming home, if you know you're coming home to a nice house, who doesn't want to come home to that? And I just feel like everybody deserves that. Their kids deserve that. They take pictures at homecoming, and you see the artwork, and you look back on those, and the cars, and you look back on, the chair you sat in your dad with when he was reading you Christmas stories or a book, and those are just memories that you have, and probably pieces that you would want to keep, that antique piece in the background of that homecoming picture or prom picture. And I just feel like it's so important and it doesn't have to be expensive at all. It just needs to make you happy when you walk in that room.
I love how you not so much turned your life around, or how this interest of yours, this passion of yours, came from a situation, from a place where it was dark and unhappy. And you on your own found happiness in something and was trying to, as a child, try to transform and bring happiness into a situation that was unhappy to you. I think it's just brilliant that you are trying to and helping people be happy in their home today. I think that's just a phenomenal correlation in your life. And I do want to get your grandmother's name, because she was a big part of your life as well.
She was. Her name was Margaret Shepherd.
Tell us a little bit about her, please.
She had my dad. He was an only child, and she had 9 miscarriages before she had him. So needless to say, he was her world. And when I came along, he kind of went to the wayside and I became her world. And she doted on me, and she was my safe haven. I spent weekends with her. It was my out of the house. She had an incredible singing voice. As a matter of fact, my last memory of her is her singing Amazing Grace in church service right before she passed away. And that was a very hard day for me. She passed away when I was 13, and I really thought my world was going to come to an end. Where was I going to go? Who was I going to have to support me? And fortunately, this is crazy, but my stepmother's brother and his wife were who took me in. They were very outspoken about the way she treated me. And after my grandmother passed away, that's who took care of me, basically. I went to their houses during the summer. I can remember just bawling in my pillow. I'd be over there for a couple of weeks because they did not live in the same town. And I'd just cry and cry and cry. I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home. But they were, and my Aunt Sherry is still here today. His wife, my Uncle Robert, passed away probably about 5 or 6 years ago. But he was a good man.
Well, you're lucky, very, very lucky. And I think we may have to have you back just to hear more about Margaret, your grandmother, because she sounds like a very special woman.
She was.
Maybe we can do that. We'll do that.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Let's talk about your app and your business. Let's Decorate app. You're helping everybody do it kind of on their own, but with assistance of someone who has the skills and the talent and the expertise of being a designer.
Absolutely. It's been so much fun. I've met people from all over the United States, from a 1904 farmhouse in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm helping a friend with her artist retreat in Kilkenny, Ireland. And the app it's so simple. Well, let me rephrase that. It sounds simple, but trust me when I tell you it was not simple to build. So basically, you create an account, you name your project, for instance, updating or refreshing your living room, for instance. You put in your measurements of the room. If you know them, if you don't, you just plug in a little number. And then you ask questions, and each question is a consultation, and you send me pictures. The reason that I'm able to do it on such a good budget is because you do a lot of the work. You may send me pictures. For instance, my biggest consultation is paint consultations. What color should I paint this room? What color should I paint the exterior of my house? I'll ask you to send me pictures, and I'll give you some ideas. You'll go to the paint store, you'll get them, you'll paint them on the wall, you'll send me some more pictures. We may talk about lighting in the room, but it's all within the app, and we keep everything right there organized so we can see everything that we've talked about. The client can go back and refer to it. If they ask me a question and I need to go back and refresh my memory, because I think I have about 85 clients on the app right now working. So I do have to refresh my memory a little bit sometimes. But it's very easy to do. I have it all organized in one spot, and you have it organized. And once we get through with that paint consultation, we're done. You can buy another package if you need to. It goes from 1 consultation, 5 consultations, 10, and 20. I believe the 21 is it's under $300, and you could do a whole house with 20 consultations. People seem to like it. I've had people that have already bought other packages, and it's flowing really well. I'm very pleased with it.
Okay, so Lynda spells her first name with a Y. It's Lynda. And her last name is Huffman, Huff as in Frank, MAN. And her app is called the Let's Decorate app. Lynda, thank you for joining us on Should Have Listened to My Mother. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, Jackie. I appreciate it.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.